Hi fam, it's Jackie from Among the Wildflowers, and I just wanted to come on here briefly and share a little bit about the physiology of people and plants, or how our bodies are impacted when we come back to the land, when we nourish those interspecies relationships with our more than human kin, and how our cells are actually attuned to be in relationship with the earth, with the water, with the elements, with the land, with our more than human kin, and how our neurotransmitters actually shift, our hormones, our gut health, our sleep, our mood. All of these things can shift when we are intentionally coming back to the land, and that could look so many different ways, whether it's growing your own medicines and tending to the land through gardening, whether that could be in ground or in pots. I could be spending just 20 minutes outside, spending time with a favorite treekin in an urban park, or opening a window and receiving the sunlight coming through, if it's sunny where you are on a particular day, coming back to ourselves, coming back to our hearts, our bodies, our own microbiome as an extension of creation, knowing that we are nature embodied, and that connecting with ourselves is also connecting with nature, and that is within us as well. And so there are so many different ways that we can connect and come back. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing a bit about specifically gardening, or tending to the land, picking medicines, growing medicines, or even just spending like 20 to 30 minutes outside. And so that could again look so many different ways. Could be going for a hike, or just sitting in a forest, or going to the water. Again, so many different ways. But one aspect I really love is when we are tending to the earth, we actually boost serotonin, and increase our serotonin levels, which is really amazing, as serotonin helps to just lift our spirits. It helps to support our overall mood, helps to support digestion, helps to support bone health, also helps to support libido, and serotonin is actually a precursor to melatonin, which helps our sleep and our circadian rhythm, among so many other functions in our body. So just like the earth, everything is intimately connected within our bodies too. So if we harmonize one aspect of our body, that is going to have a ripple effect. And of course, when I say harmonize, or when I say like this has like this effect, everybody is so different. And so this isn't to say that we each will have the same experience, or the same physiology, or the same accessibility, or the same perspective and experiences. All of these things also are unique, as we each are also so unique. And so I'm sharing this more as a reminder that we are meant to be in relationship with the earth. We are meant to be in relationship with our more than human kin. And oftentimes our relationships are so focused on humans, and not as much on the importance of really, really nourishing relationships with our treekin and with the water. And so it's just a reminder that we actually have physiological shifts, which I just think is so amazing. As a bit of a science nerd too, how when we are nurturing those relationships, we actually may be balancing different functions and pathways and hormones in our bodies too. So serotonin is one that may be supported when we are tending to the earth, and dopamine is another. And so dopamine, I think, like so many of us, I feel like over the last couple of years, dopamine has been talked about a lot, as also boosting mood, but also like focus and like motivation, things like that. And so the interesting thing is, when we're spending a lot of time on our devices, we're actually releasing dopamine. And so these pathways can kind of become a little bit dysregulated, which I'm sure many of you have noticed. I notice this for myself when I spend too much time on social media or on my devices. Like, it really does. I can feel it. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it kind of in my mood and my ability to focus. And when we spend time on the land, or tending to the earth, or outside, just in relationship with our more than human kin, we are actually supporting dopamine through pathways that we've been nourishing since origins, which is just so beautiful, and also operates on different rhythms, and so there isn't this sense of like urgency. So when we plant a seed, you know, it can take a while to germinate, and so there's that patience and that level of like slowness and trust and timing, and then it can take a while for that sprout to grow and then to bloom. And if we're harvesting roots, you know, it could be years before we harvest. And so that dopamine is kind of like spread out a little bit. And of course, there's so many different ways and pathways and nutrients and all of those things related to dopamine too. So you know, of course, this is just a brief video that I'm just sharing a few beautiful things that I really love. And that aspect of supporting dopamine is one. And just coming back into that rhythm with creation, instead of kind of like the go, and just like the constant producing, constant production, and just kind of like the colonial and capitalist kind of ways of always being on and having kind of things immediately. So even like dopamine, like just like, you know, the immediate aspect of it, and that can kind of create the urgency and also like fight or flight response or stress response. I do want to delve into cortisol, but I just remembered as well, going back to serotonin, there's actually been some studies that also have shown that just spending 20 to 30 minutes outside tending to the medicine garden, and so that could be gardening in different ways, actually may also increase specific neurotrophic factors. So I forget, there's two specifically. So essentially growth factors in the brain can be increased. So there's more studies that are happening for gardening for cognitive health and cognitive support, especially for like memory and focus and things like that, which is really, really beautiful. How, you know, like when we come and we spend time, just, I mean, right now there's daffodils blooming, so I'm just enamored with the beauty of the daffodil. And when we just spend time, and then the birds in the background, like this itself actually can reduce cortisol, which of course impacts our hormones, so our sex hormones, as well as our blood sugar regulation, our glucose. It impacts our sleep, our mood. All of these things are impacted. So I guess that delves or moves us into cortisol and that relationship. So when we spend time outside or on the land, there's a big eagle flying by. When we spend time on the land or outside, we also often are lowering cortisol, and it doesn't take much time for the cortisol to be lowered either. So there's a few different studies on all of these things, and some of these things are more like one especially that I'll talk about a little bit later if there's time, has been done more with animals and not as many studies with humans, but cortisol is one that has been shown with humans. And also, we don't necessarily need these studies to show us and to remind us what we've always known. You know, like our bodies clearly know this, our spirits know this, you know, our mental health knows this. We know these relationships, they are within us, they are us. And so we also don't need studies and research to tell us what we have always known. But also, I do love understanding and learning about how our physiology actually shifts and how our hormones shift in response to different things. And so to me, it's just, I don't know, it's just really beautiful how our physiology actually changes in response to being in a relationship. And of course it changes. We can feel it. So anyway, cortisol. So cortisol is often known as a stress hormone, and it's really important. Cortisol being in balance, in balance, not imbalanced, in balance is really important. So you don't want, you know, too much cortisol for like a sustained period of time, as that can lead to inflammation, again impacting perceptions of stress, ability to handle stress. It can impact our blood sugar regulation, impact our hormones, which can impact our mood, our appetite, our libido, our hair, our sleep. Everything is again connected and woven so closely. So cortisol is really an important one. And oftentimes a lot of people have high cortisol due to, stress, which we're not even going to delve into, because it's not an individual issue necessarily. It's a systemic issue, and so the stress is there. And so when we can connect and come back to the earth and the plants and the land and the water, and listen to the birds, all of those things, we can reduce cortisol. And so to me, it's also a way of like building resilience. And it's coming back to ourselves, which of course, even coming back into our bodies, there can be so much there, and it may not be as simple as or comfortable as coming back to our bodies. That can also be painful. So we're not delving into that or those aspects either. But we also don't want too little cortisol either. And so I didn't find too much on whether our cortisol levels can actually be raised, but if we're reducing our like stress response, so sympathetic nervous system kind of like overdrive, then that itself can support balanced cortisol levels. So again, not delving too deeply, as this video is already quite long. But one of the other things I really love about gardening, especially, and tending to the land and the soil, is there's there's actually, I'm using a little tripod here, and it's not perfectly set up. Okay, I think that's okay for the lighting. The sun is shifting a little bit, but there's a microbe in the soil. So the soil has its own microbiome, just like we have our own microbiome. And there's actually a microbe in the soil called Mycobacterium vaccae. So a lot of the studies have been done in animals, or with the Mycobacteria vaccae being actually injected. And so I'll share this, but also there needs to be like a little bit more, I guess, exploration into how we are connected and how this specific microbe impacts our physiology. But right now it seems that the Mycobacteria vaccae can actually help boost our serotonin levels again in such a way that it could be as effective as Prozac is what kind of a lot of people who have shared about it have compared it to. And again, that's a bold statement, but we do know that when we are in relationship and when we are connecting, that we can feel that within ourselves too. And so I share this as a way of just also remembering these connections and the importance of these connections and the importance of spending time in ways that are accessible, and also the importance of having access to medicine garden, to a community garden, to spaces to tend to the land and to pick medicines and to grow food and all of these things. So it's a really cool microbe that can actually help support our mental health. And so of course we know this, we know that when we're in relationship with the land, we're supporting our mental and spiritual and emotional health, and physical as well. So these are just a few aspects of ways that our physiology actually may harmonize or shift in response to being with the land and being in relationship. So the last one I'll share about, as this video is already very long, is our immune system can also be impacted by spending time with the land. So that could be just as simple as sitting in a forest or an urban park, or it could be, again, like gardening and tending to the land, but it can actually support our immune system. And so there's various ways. It can increase natural or NK cells, which are really important. They're like protectors of the body. So they go through the body and just ensure that nothing is there or growing that shouldn't be there. So to me, I see them like energetically as like protectors of the body. So again, supporting our boundaries as well, which is really beautiful, and like that protective medicine as well, which the garden kind of always feels like that, as I also have the protection. And so like kind of awakening that, like, that earth protector and water protector as well, when we nourish those relationships and remember our responsibilities. But also there is a cytokine, IL-6, and it's really neat as it helps. It's an inflammatory cytokine, and so we want it to be in balance. So inflammation, I don't want to delve too deeply into this, but inflammation isn't always like a bad thing. Like we sometimes need an inflammatory response when it's balanced. The issue sometimes is when there's an excess or a chronic, or when there's some sort of imbalance there. So it's an inflammatory cytokine, and when we're in awe or amazement, we actually lower our IL-6 levels, which is really cool to me, because it's actually showing that when we're in awe, and for me, like, I often feel in awe, like every day, like every moment, like spending time intentionally on the land and with our more than human kin, and just noticing like the different colors and textures, or like a sunset or the stars. And so it's just awe or amazement, or even like the tree in front of me and all the different like lichens and moss, and just it's all so beautiful. And so when we're in awe, or kind of like that amazement, like I just imagine like the childlike awe, we're actually reducing that inflammatory cytokine too, which is so cool. Okay, this video is way longer than I intended it to be. I don't even know if it's going to upload, but I hope that you found it supportive and maybe learned some things. Grow Your Own Medicine is still open for enrollment. It's one of the reasons I love growing medicines, and it's one of the reasons I love sharing about growing medicines and tending to the land, because it just brings in so much healing, not only to us and to our bodies and our spirits and our emotional well-being, our mental health, but also bringing that healing and rippling that out to creation when we tend to the soil and we tend to the earth, and we remember our relationships and rhythms with the sun and the water. It activates so much within us, and balances and harmonizes so much within us. And so it's one reason I really love sharing this specific offering. And there's so many ways outside of it that you can come back and you can connect. So I hope that if you're able to, you're able to spend some time nurturing those relationships, and spending some time outside or in the sun, or just connecting with yourself if that feels accessible and supportive, and just sending you lots of love.